Hi, I'm State Senator Kevin Parker. I represent the 21st District in Brooklyn, which is Flatbush and East Flatbush, Midwood, Dittmans Park, Windsor Terrace, and Park Slope. And welcome to my report for the New York State Senate. One of the most important things that we work on here, and particularly me as the chair of the Energy and Telecommunications Committee in the State Senate, is the idea of the environment. And taking care of our environment, I think, is one of the most critical roles that we have here in the New York State Senate. And particularly our energy infrastructure is important, both in the context of taking care of our planet, but then also providing us the much needed energy to heat our homes and take care of our business, runs our computers and our laptops. And somebody who's been on the forefront of making sure that we do that in the most sustainable way possible is my guest today, Ann Reynolds.
Hi.
The president of ACE New York. How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm great. I'm really great that you're here.
Thanks.
So you are the president of ACE. Tell everybody about what ACE is and and how you guys operate.
Sure. So it's the Alliance for Clean Energy of New York. Mm-hmm. We work as a trade organization, so our members are renewable energy companies that do wind power, solar power, fuel cells, hydroelectric. But we're a little different from other trade associations in that half of our board of directors is environmental organizations. Mm-hmm. So I spend my time getting environmental organizations and renewable energy companies to agree with each other and advocate for policies to help with renewable energy.
Like herding cats?
Yes. Spent a lot of time on that.
So how did you wind up at ACE? What did you do before that?
Sure. I'm a native upstate New Yorker. Okay. I still live in the town I grew up in.
Nice.
And I moved away for 14 years and came back to work for a group called Environmental Advocates of New York first. Absolutely. And then I went and worked for the state at the Department of Environmental Conservation, and I left there as the Deputy Commissioner for Administration.
Awesome. So you used to give out smokestacks?
Yes, I did. Yep, and trees.
And trees.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
It was a really great place to work, coming to Albany to learn the environmental community and the legislature.
Yeah, that's incredible. Now, how many member organizations do you have? And if you can, to some degree, if you know how many trade, corporations versus environmental organizations.
Yeah,
that'd be interesting.
This year we have 62 members.
Wow.
And probably about 10 of them are environmental organizations or universities and that type of thing. And then the rest are renewable energy companies, energy efficiency companies, and consultants and technical consultants and legal consultants for the renewable community.
Great. So what is the major priorities of ACE New York?
We want to build renewable energy and get energy efficiency projects happening. We want to clean up the grid, make it more clean and sustainable, and clear the air and create jobs. But the companies that are members of ACE, they want to invest in New York, and so we advocate the policies that help improve the landscape for renewable energy in New York.
Right, that's incredible. So
sometimes it works.
So what are the big things that you guys are working on now?
Yeah, so we had been pushing for the renewable energy standard in New York, which we now have 50% by 2030. Mm-hmm. And so that was a success. And then as we have that policy in place, then the companies come to New York and they have other issues and concerns, like making it through the permitting process, right, making it through the interconnection process at the grid, which is important for reliability, as you in your introduction, but it also can't take forever or we're never going to get these renewable projects built. Mm-hmm. In the legislature now, the climate legislation is a top priority because it's so important and because it's moving. But we also pay attention to policies at the Commission, the Public Service Commission, at the ISO, which is the grid operator, mm-hmm, and at other state agencies like NYSERDA.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of mm-hmm, oversight you have to do.
I bother a lot of people.
In terms of energy.
Yeah.
The big thing that we're kind of working on that you kind of touched on is the CCPA. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about that and kind of what is ACE New York's position?
Sure. I'll start first. I mentioned I've been in Albany for 18 years. Yeah. It's so exciting that climate legislation is finally being negotiated and discussed and debated in the legislature and with the governor's office. So, I mean, my knee-jerk reaction is excellent. It's so good we're focusing on that. The proposal from the governor is 70% renewable energy by 2030, and from the legislature at the moment is 50% by 2030. So both of those are positive, but as you imagine, we like the 70%. But we're hoping for different suggestions of ours that would make it into the legislation that would be more specific to getting near-term milestones, getting projects built, having interim guidepost to getting to that ultimate goal. But I feel I should say that New York is the only state that has a renewable energy standard that's not in law. So if we end this session by putting that in law, that would really be great progress.
All right, so noted. We're working on that. That's certainly been one of the priorities for both myself and I know the Assembly Chair of Energy Committee have had that conversation, and certainly something that's a big priority. What does having it in law actually mean for the people of the state of New York?
Right. Well, we have strong renewable energy policies. They've been established by the governor and the Public Service Commission, which is good. But if a governor changes and doesn't have the same priority for renewable energy, then that policy can go away. That hasn't happened, but it is something that we worry about. So if it's in law, that makes the policy stronger and the companies feel more certain that it's a good place to invest.
No, absolutely. We certainly want to provide certainty for corporations because they like to, invest in, kind of stable environments and places that they know what the policy is, so that they can make long-range decisions, particularly with investments. So that's absolutely critical. Is there any preference in terms of the sustainable energies that ACE pushes? Is it primarily solar, or is it wind? Is it hydro?
We have members that do all three of that. We don't have a preference. At any given time, different technologies are more active or more appropriate. So the wind resource is upstate. You're not going to build wind power below Albany and in the city. There's no room for it, and it's not that windy, believe it or not. Offshore,
I don't
it
know
is
if the people in the city
extremely-
actually believe
I know,
that
that's
it's not
what
that
I mean.
windy.
But it's windier up here. Offshore wind is perfect for New York State because it's extremely windy offshore. It happens to be windy in late afternoon, early evening when people are using a lot of electricity. And you could have that electricity located close to New York City and Long Island where there's a lot of people using electricity. Solar was more expensive than wind, but the price of that has come down 40% just in the last 5 years or so. So now those two technologies are competing well with each other. Hydroelectric, it's very difficult to get new dams built. There's not a lot of spaces for that, but you can make upgrades and make more electricity at the plants that you have. So our basic message is if we're going to get to 70% renewable or 100%, we're going to need a lot of everything.
Right. So let's talk about, about how we actually, kind of get to this goal. What are some of the steps that, we could be doing in the state legislature and the government generally to kind of, prime the state for more investment and more projects coming online?
Yeah. Well, from the developer's point of view, there's three things they need to get a project built. They need someone to buy the power, they need an agreement to interconnect to the grid, and they need a permit. So that's where ACE focuses our activities. So in the legislature, there's a state law that regulates permitting and siting of renewable energy and all power plants called Article 10. It's a good law. It's probably the most comprehensive environmental review and public participation in the country. My view is that the law can stay the same, but we have to have more people at the Public Service Commission processing these renewable applications because we're talking about a major transition of the electric grid. So there's a lot of proposals for wind and solar projects coming at these same 5 guys working at the PSC processing applications. So keeping an eye on that.
It's 14, but who's counting?
I don't really know how many guys.
Yes.
But also making sure that the grid operator understands that it's a priority of the state to get these projects connected to the grid. Now, they have to make sure that it's done safe and reliably, and I understand that. But again, they haven't been set up to have so many new proposals all at once.
Right.
So, and then the offtake agreements. So, for example, there was legislation in the state budget that would allow the New York Power Authority to buy renewables and sell it to New York cities and towns. And that passed this year. We were supportive of it because we want there to be more customers for renewable energy. A lot of people want to buy green power. I really believe that. But the problem is to get these projects financed and built, they need a long-term contract. And even a greenie like me isn't going to sign a 20-year contract because I don't know where I'm going to be living and that type of thing. So it's important that state agencies can step into that role or utilities can step into that role, have those long-term contracts, and then sell that renewable energy to people on a short-term basis. So all of those three things are necessary to get projects built. So anything you could do to help with that would be great.
Well, we have helped a little bit, as you indicated, in this state budget, right? Which is actually why I know the number of people who are actually processing Article 10. It literally is 14. We actually authorized another 8, additional 8 people coming on board. And so we're hoping even next year to actually increase that number even more, because we're not even clear that the 14 plus the 8 is going to be enough to get us where, because literally we have to totally ramp up. And it's just so people kind of understand the finance piece of this, right? Is that, to build a windmill, to build a solar plant, right? This producing solar energy for, a couple of gigawatts. It's long-term financing that you need.
Yeah.
And so you need markets to understand they have somebody who's going to be a customer, at least for part of that financing, until the out years, so that they have at least a base understanding of where their customers are going to come from. So it's not a matter of just build it and they will come. You really want to have your purchasing agreements, or offtake agreements as they call them, but you want to have these purchasing agreements up front before you even build your project.
You have to.
Yes, and so that's an important thing for people to know.
Yeah.
People, when most of our folks in our communities, whether upstate or in Brooklyn, they don't even think about energy when they turn their lights on. They flick that switch or they plug something in and it comes on. And then when the bill comes, right? So that's the only times they think about it. You and I have responsibilities both about the commodity and about when people flick the switch, but then also about the industry and understanding that you have to, in fact, build an environment in which the industry can flourish. And so you've been doing a great job at that, and I want to thank you, about for all that you're doing. Yeah,
and thank you to you too, both for the NYPA legislation and other work that you've done.
Absolutely. And so we also in this year's budget, I guess KKLL, one of those areas, did in fact provide the NYPA as a offtake to buy some of that offshore wind. So we're going to see a major offshore wind. Actually, I want to say in the next week or two, they're going to make, NYSERDA is going to make a decision.
I hear they're going to make a decision. Yeah, that's exciting. I'm sure. And they got about 5 proposals from 5 different companies to build the first one. So I'm sure they're all on the edge of their seats waiting. And then the next exciting thing will be, how are they going to stage those projects?
Right.
What port in New York City are they going to use to support that? What jobs will come from that? And
most of the proposals that I've seen and folks I've talked to have already put the port that they're going to use. So again, we're having a little bit of inside baseball. So first of all, when we talk about offshore wind, offshore wind is miles out. It's like 75 miles out, right? Most of these projects you can't even see from shore, right? So if you're standing at the beach, you're not going to be able to see a wind turbine, out in the horizon, right? So so people should understand it's so far out that you won't be able to see it, and they're going to have transmission lines that hook into the grid on shore. But you have to do the construction on shore. You can't build it. You have to build and take it out there. You can't build it in the water, and so you have to have an agreement with the port. And so many of those projects have actually already picked ports that they have decided that they would work from. And you're right, it's going to create jobs. Sometimes 50 to 100 jobs, or even more, depending on who the project is being done by. And these are full-time jobs that live with their benefits.
The Block Island Wind Farm, which is the only offshore wind farm operating in the U.S. now, they used about 5 different ports for different parts of the construction and operation. And so what we're really hoping is if we build the offshore wind industry in New York, it's going to support jobs in different places around New York City and Long Island or Staten Island. I think that would be ideal. And I actually think that's what's going to be required, because there's no one port is big enough to do all this work.
That's right. And the energy needs of places like Brooklyn are just increasing, right? As we increase population, as more people decide they want to live in Brooklyn, which is a great thing, we're going to need more energy. And so, and with the closing of Indian Point, there's a lot more pressure on the grid and the suppliers.
And to do something about climate change, eventually we're going to have to electrify transportation and have electric vehicles and even electrify some home heating. So that's cleaner and it's more efficient, but only if the electricity you're using is renewable.
That's right. Let's lower that carbon footprint. Let's lower energy bills, and let's create more jobs.
Yeah, that's the idea.
All right. Thank you, Anna. I really appreciate having you.
My pleasure.
Again, our clean energy future is very, very bright. And with organizations like ACE New York, we're in a perfect position in both Brooklyn and the state of New York to take advantage of it. If you want more information about ACE New York or more information about clean energy technologies, please feel free to reach out to my office, 718-629-6401. Again, that's 718-629-6401. And this is Senator Kevin Parker, and this has been my report from the New York State Senate.